I'm your anchor, Chuckston, and this is my co-anchor, Billson.
Coming in hot today, we got everything strike news about the 2023 summer, spring, fall strike from the WGA and the SAG.
This is Strike News. Now, we know that we're talking about this many months late, but we didn't have our podcast functioning then, and now we do, so we're going to talk about it.
And now it's relevant because coming into awards season, as well as new filming seasons for shows, how has it affected those shows, movies, the awards this year, and really everything for the industry as we enter a new year, hopefully, of less strikes and more media? I forgot what your name was. Chuckston, is that what it is? Is that what you said?
I am Chuckston, and you are Billson.
Great, okay. Anyways, Gavin, can I just call you Gavin? It's a little easier. Today we're going to talk about the WGA strike that became the WGA SAG strike that happened, literally ended not more than 3 months ago. It's still impacting box offices, streaming platforms, industries, studios. Ideally being confirmed as we get some social media posts of projects coming back that have been on hold, but it's exciting. We just wanted to do a little overview of what exactly went on, what the fuck was happening, why it happened, what was concluded. Did they even come to an agreement? Yes, they did, but what does that agreement mean for the future? Hopefully good things. So initially the strike started with the WGA and AMTPA,
which is a thing that happens quite often.
We're going to be using a few acronyms quite a lot today. WGA is the Writers Guild of America.
The AMPTP, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers.
And then we have the SAG-AFTRA, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. So if you hear those acronyms, now you know. Actors, writers, and the big men with the money, pretty much, is what we're talking about. WGA started the initial uproar on May 2nd, 2023. It was talked about briefly before it happened, and then it happened, and it went into effect. We get Writers Guild strikes. I mean, they happen fairly often. The industry is fucked, man. It happens about every 3 years, really.
2007. Well, it's every 3 years because that's when their contracts are up for renegotiation. I think the last big one was 2007-ish. Because there's a lot of shows that had... Well, the last big time there was a strike that affected the industry this way. 30 Rock, that's why shows were getting canceled around 2007, 2008.
You always have what was referred to as the strike season, because it's like a season where it's just bad writing because it wasn't the writer's room that was writing it.
Yeah, if you watch a show and it's season 1, 20 episodes, season 2, 20 episodes, season 3, why is it only 10? It's because of the strike.
Right. So they're referred to as strike seasons, or, I don't know. But yeah, every 3 years is when they renegotiate the contracts. And so it often happens around that time when they're like, hey, this sucks and we want more credit, basically. It's the big men with the money fighting against the little men who don't get enough of the money. This time around, it lasted 148 days, which was the second longest strike since 1960, which was 153 days was the longest labor stoppage. This time around, the major dispute was with AMPTP. Main issues were residuals, specifically for writers, not getting residuals off of a lot of television and films, but nowadays with streaming platforms and media, the residuals they mostly get are when things go to the theaters, but there's plenty of films, television that's just direct to streaming that the residuals are massively cut out. A lot of the income that writers acquire has been massively cut over the decades. It's kind of like as inflation increases, they haven't increased pay.
And it's also because, like you're saying with the residuals, they are not getting the residuals for streaming really at all.
Exactly. I mean, because if the studio can still get money and still make money off of these things being on streaming, why should the artist who created them also not get money? It was kind of the idea, because there's so many shows that don't even go on TV anymore because they're all just direct to streaming. So it's okay, but it is when you have a big hit show like The Office, Breaking Bad,
Parks and Rec, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Suits is a big relevant one,
Game of Thrones, all of those, they stop airing and then the residuals stop, which it just cheaps it out because the studios are making so much money just from it being streamed. and that money is not going to the artists. There was also a lot of backlash on AI as AI becomes more heavily popular and utilized, especially the last couple of years. A lot of studios want to use AI for script writing because it's cheaper. They don't have to pay a human to do it. But that means that writers are getting cheated out of jobs. And there were cases of AI stealing scripts with the way AI has been found to steal plenty of art. But they wanted protection from that, and especially when it comes to losing jobs and being like giving an idea but then having the AI write that idea.
AI is not that good. And it's really just about job protection. Like, they don't want their jobs to be taken by robots.
Exactly. Because like, what are they supposed to do with their life? That's what they are. That's what they're known for. That's their art, their artistry, and their livelihood. Just like anyone. It's the same with like, factory workers getting replaced by machines. Stenographers getting replaced by recording. It's literally the same thing.
And studios, they fight dirty. I think it was Warner Brothers. They cut down the trees so that there would be no shade for people who were striking, and people would be out there striking consistently all the time.
And in a place like California, where it's hot, it's sunny, they're there all day, they're standing around. It was really dirty, and it wasn't even their trees to cut down. They had to end up paying a fine, which wasn't even that much of a fine, to be honest, which is bullshit.
Of course it wasn't. Fines are just poor person cost,
Exactly.
If you're poor, a fine matters.
I mean, but it wasn't even that big of a fine for
ridiculous.
Like, I don't even think it was a couple $1,000s. Like, it was barely anything. And I'm like, these are trees, man. We have laws against this. Maybe not in California. I don't know. In Washington, we have tree laws about cutting trees down, but
that's why we have so many of them.
And then there was this time around, especially with social media, in the past, social media, like 2007, social media was not as big. Now it's accessible everywhere, and that's the main course. So many things came out of studio leaders' opinions and things they said, specifically thoughts on, we're just going to wait out till the writers
basically till they're poor and they have
become homeless. Like, and it was just the dirtiest. Like, you just realize how shitty these studios are, because they really don't care, and they just care about the money that they're making and not the people behind it, which was just distressing to see and heartbreaking, because it's like, you would hope there's people there.
And unfortunately, it's the thing we've always known to be true, but with, like you're saying with social media and stuff, it is far more apparent and far more accessible now than ever that, like,
far more apparent, and even recorded for all time.
Fuck.
Because now it's just, you can go find it anywhere. It's still there. It's still online. It's recorded, and they can't take back what they say.
Yeah, so it's a pretty fucked up thing that studios are doing, and will probably continue to do, because the bottom line is more important than the people's lives.
There was also some backlash from like general public, where people were like, oh, but the big writers, the writers we all know, are perfectly fine. They're making a bunch of money. And that's not that's not the point. The point was that
it's not about those people.
It's not about those people. And luckily, those people were just as willing to support those that couldn't, and even donate and give their time and money that they had to help support those. There were I don't remember the names of them, but there were funds set up for writers.
Well, there's like the Entertainment Community Fund. There's things like that they've been around for a long time, even before now, to help people.
Right.
Struggling writers and performers pay their bills. You see, it was more obvious with, like, the SAG strike. Because, like, obviously, there's the big names. And you're like, Robert Downey Jr., these people have to worry about their paychecks? No, that's fucking dumb. But it's about the people, it's about just the average people. They're, like, the 1% of actors that can make a living doing this and be, like, super financially successful. Mm-hmm. It's about everybody else.
Exactly. And those big names are using their faces to show their support.
And that was one thing that's like, you see these people like using, a majority of them anyways, using their platform to be like, yeah, I got extra money, I'll donate, I support the strike, all these things. They're not like, well, I'm fine, so fuck these guys.
Right, yeah. And I mean, not that this would affect those that are good-hearted and have good intentions, but, if they weren't to support the strike, they would get blacklisted too. So they do have like a
motivation,
a little bit of motivation otherwise. Not to say that none of them have good hearts and good intentions, because most of them. I mean, there's a couple names that we won't drop of people that very clearly broke the picket line. And
I don't know if you saw a lot about this, but it was really interesting, because there was, when it first started happening, there was like creators on TikTok being like, studios are probably going to try and come to you and get you to write stuff. Mm-hmm. But if you do that, you will be fucked. So
you'll be crossing the picket line and you won't get a job later, and you won't ever be able to join the WGA for doing so. I was in a production that at the time, we started rehearsal. Well, we started rehearsals in June, so it was right after the strike started. And because studio names were involved and bigger names were involved, we had to ask. We were like, how does this, are we, what are the rules here? Are we crossing the picket? Thankfully, we weren't. They were able to get the information we needed and ensure that this wasn't part of that. But there was a moment. And then also when the SAG joined, again, we had to bring up, are we still okay? Because none of us wanted to risk crossing the pickets. We were all willing to walk if it was going to be, crossing the line. Unfortunately, as it would have been, because we would have lost a lot of money for our job. But
it is that weird thing. It's like you mentioned, there's the business motivation of you don't want to get blacklisted, but then there's like the motivation personal is like, I don't want to do this. It seems like a weird cycle. Like, am I not crossing the picket line because I don't want to get blacklisted and I want to work here, or because I actually respect what they're doing? I think,
which is fair, yeah.
In a lot of cases, it's more the latter. Like, you're doing it because you know what they're fighting for is the right thing and you want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But then, there's that 10% that's like, I also want to continue to work here.
I mean, so. It's a little bit, it's both, I mean, it's both. But in July 14th is when SAG joined WGA. Again, their contract comes up every 3 years, so quite often there are overlaps between SAG and WGA. How convenient. I mean, there was talk even before that they would join, just because their contract was coming up. There were debates going on. They were already in support of WGA. There's a lot of camaraderie between WGA and SAG. Also because there's plenty of actors in SAG and plenty who are also writers and are part of both guilds. But July is when they joined. It was a big deal. There were actors walking out of premieres because when midnight hits, you have to leave.
I remember that was Oppenheimer. They did that.
There was a whole let's expedite these premieres and these, I don't know if you remember around July, but so many things were just promoting everything. I think it was Barbenheimer, it was Mission Impossible, just because they had to get those out before actors weren't allowed to do press anymore. It was kind of very similar concerns: streaming rights, residuals, AI representation, especially when it comes to modifying and replacing actors' faces, or not hiring the actors and placing their face on other.
And again, this is for not the people that These are not for like your Steve Carells, your Tina Feys, your Amy Poehler's. It's not for these people. It's for the people that are, the B, C, D list, pardon the phrase, but, the people that are lower on the rung that are just trying to, make a basic living.
Exactly.
Jack Black made an interesting point. He's like, every actor I know has a second job. Even I have Tenacious D.
Well, and it's also, there's plenty of these big names who, I mean, I don't even know how much money Robert Downey Jr. makes for every Iron Man appearance.
Tons.
Millions. And then you'll have another actor in the same movie.
Let's say like Danny Pudi.
Who gets far less, still a big name, but not Robert Downey fucking Jr. playing Iron Man. Or like Donald Glover for his, little cameo in Spider.
What is the harm really? And maybe I just paid Robert Downey Jr. Let's say if he's making $20 million. What if I only pay him $19 million? I take that other $1 million and I just give a little bit more to all the other actors. What if we just did that?
Or you just up your budget.
Do you really need $20 million?
Most of the time when they up their budget, it's going to the producers.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need as big of a budget as a lot of these movies are getting. I feel like that's enough. It's just the greed of the whole thing. And if we throw the feeling of if I throw a lot of money at this, it'll be good, right?
And then it's also
works. You've never seen one example of that
and then
failing.
It's also just bringing some equality to background extras, secondary actors, supporting actors. Background extras, they don't have a trailer. They're there for 8 to 12 hours. They walk back and forth doing the same thing for 3 hours at a time. They're in the sun, they're in the heat, they're in the cold. They don't have a specific makeup artist. They go through, not to undermine big league name actors, but also we can't undermine those others as well, because they're putting in just as much effort, just as much energy and work and time as anyone else. They may not be featured on the screen, but they're still giving just as much. This was a pretty big deal to have both SAG and WGA striking at the same time.
Because it hasn't happened, like you were saying earlier, since 1960, so it's been 60 years almost since both were on strike
Which
at the same
is
time.
insane. Not only does it mean there are far less workers available to work, but it also means that so many, because, you know, if it's just the WGA, there's workarounds. We can use AI. We can get TikTok writers, whatever the fuck. Same with SAG. We can do more indies and do non-SAG sets. There's a little bit more of a workaround. Mm-hmm. When it's both, there's not much of a workaround. Also because SAG and WGA isn't just the actors and the writers. It involves more people as well that you wouldn't just think of. Because SAG is actors. SAG is for movies, SAG is actors for television, SAG is actors for radio, SAG is actors for commercials. It's so broad. It meant that a lot of studios and a lot of movies and shows had to put a pause on things because they couldn't have their actors, they couldn't have their writers. There's plenty of television shows where the writers still come to set, so they had to pause because even if the writers weren't on set, they didn't have their actors, etc. Or if they involved the writers with their set, they couldn't continue because they needed the writers there.
And the thing is, you need those people on set for rewrites and things like that. You really see the scope of, what actually is necessary, how necessary writers are. It's not just write a script, turn it in, and you're done. They'll have writers on sets for TV shows write alts, especially for comedies.
There's plenty of director-writer pairs, actor-writer pairs.
The other thing we're seeing is a lot of those shows are getting there's a lot of shows are being kind of canceled, and they're sort of the result of that. Young Sheldon got canceled. Well, it's not canceled, but it's going to be on its last season, and I feel like that's at least partially due to the strike. And there's plenty of other shows that are sort of the same way. Had there been no strike, I think some of these shows could have got another season.
Exactly. And it's also just having to postpone seasons, messes up your seasons, because if you have young actors that you can't wait a long time to film because you need them to still look young, or
Stranger Things.
Yeah. Well, and Young Sheldon as well.
That one they get away with a little more because they sort of age him up as it goes along.
It came at such an interesting time because the summer is such a big season for filming, especially because of airing season being in the fall and being in the new year. You got to film over the summer and the spring and early fall to get it all out. And it was especially interesting up here in Washington because spring and summer is when we get our industry, it outside of our commercial industry, because that's when our weather is nice. Unless you're looking for rain, you're not going to film up in Seattle or Washington until it's nice out. With the Washington State film incentives over the last couple years, the tax incentives, there's been a couple shows, big shows and big studios that have come up here to film stuff and were supposed to return over the summer and couldn't, which means a lot of people were out of work, myself and my friends included, because that's what we rely on, is that seasonal kind of cycle for that work. So we have to go find other things to do, which it was happening not just in Washington. We're not an outlier. I mean, everyone, had to go find other things to do because their seasonal work was gone. I mean, when you work in the industry, you have to schedule things months in advance because I'm going to have this production for 3 months and I can't do anything else. But after that, I'm good, or I'm free for the next one. But if you block that out and then it comes up and you can't do it, you're scrambling to find something. And it's hard because a lot of places won't just hire for a short time and expedited hiring, A lot of big studios who were either losing money because they were trying to stay in pre-production and
all the
keep paying
big
people.
Five were
right, but not being able to film.
I see what you're talking about. Yes. Well, see, then we saw some examples of that, some people were still paying their staff. I know that Sam Reich on Dropout, he did that. I'm pretty sure he still paid people during the strike.
Because they're like, oh, it's going to end soon and we'll continue. And it went a lot longer than they thought.
Some of the late night hosts, they paid their staff for 2 weeks, I think. Some paid more, some paid less. Whatever it is, it's
and that's another thing is live, what do you call, talk shows is included in that, because not only are some of those hosts members, but the guests they have on are members. SNL had to be paused. It's all these things that you wouldn't consider to be a film, a television. It's still included and it's still affected, which is just crazy. I mean, SNL was doing reruns, but there's so many things where you just weren't getting new content. There were talk shows that were held on pause. And again, that also affects all those other workers as well. We had IATSE strikes just a few years ago involving the industry for all the crew members that do so much work. There's so many thousands of people that work on these projects that you don't even think about. And when something big closes or pauses, like Stranger Things, for example, was one of the things that got affected and paused. They were supposed to film over the summer. There's so many people, and they have different teams in New Mexico and Georgia, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that weren't getting paid for months and months. And they're the people that aren't already making millions of money and can survive for months,
right,
without money.
It's just a whole mess, and it is interesting because I feel like everybody saw how it's affecting all these different things. And, going back to like the IATSE and the crew, what I like about the industry, or one of the things I sort of like about it, is just that there is sort of an internal camaraderie, like if crew's on strike, they're being supported by the actors and writers and vice versa. Like the crew, they wouldn't cross picket lines.
Right.
Even though they knew it would cost them money to not cross. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be that guy.
Because their friends, their family, their coworkers are the ones losing out and being on strike. Yeah. And I mean, plenty of, studios were just losing money. Yeah, the big ones, Netflix, Warner Bros., Disney, etc. That to a point where there were like force majeure clauses, and they were breaking deals because they just didn't want to spend money anymore, and it was cheaper, and they're always about money. So they're breaking off long-term contracts.
Yeah, a bunch of people like at the WB Apple, they pretty much lost all their contracts. I think one thing we should also talk about is studios like A24, who were able to continue work during the strikes.
Yeah, and everyone's like, how? What does that...
Exactly, because
how are they able to... Oh, they're cheating, they're crossing the picket, but really what it
boils down to is they were going to... So the contract had all these stipulations, and they were like, okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll agree to those. The reason the strike kept going on and on and on is that they would meet up, AMPTP and SAG would meet up and go through their contract and try and make deals. And they did this like 3 or 4 times over the course of 6 months. And every time, rightly so, the strikers were like, no, it's not enough. Like, you're not putting any effort in. There was one time where I think it was maybe the 3rd meeting, and whatever the deal was less than what was offered before. It was like, we're not idiots. We're not stupid. Like, we know what we're fighting for. Do you think we forgot what you proposed to us 2 months ago? We're not, like, what? It was fucking crazy. But yeah, and then there's places like A24 where they're like, we don't care about the big money. Yeah, we will go with your contract. We agree. And so SAG was like, great, let's make some movies.
And it's also used as like a bargaining chip, because it's like, okay, so this... I mean, A24 is probably a decent-sized studio, but still smaller than like your Disney, your WBs, your Discovery.
They produce big things with big names, but they also produce small things with small unknown names.
But if they're like, all right, well, they're going to meet our negotiations, so clearly it's not that much to ask for. So we'll work with them, and we just won't work with you. How's that sound?
Yeah, which kind of worked.
Just a tactic, and it did work. So,
it did work, and also everyone was like. Because so many things were getting postponed, Dune was postponed, television shows were postponed, what other movies were postponed? People were like, oh, what's going to happen for the Oscars, for the award seasons? We don't have movies that are coming out. Things aren't coming out in December, which is the big seasonal time for award eligible movies to come out. So everyone's like, what is even going to be awarded? And then you're like, oh, A24 is making a bunch of movies. Is A24 just going to take over the Oscars now? Unfortunately... Now that we have the Oscar nominations, not quite so as much as we would have liked to see it. But it gave a great opportunity for films like that, which also I think was a bargaining chip and motivation for the big studios being like, hey, we want our awards that we deserve. And it's like, okay, well, they also deserve awards, but the little guy, the A24 deserves awards too. But the big guys were like, hey, we're missing out. We got to get on top of this. So, it was motivational. Yeah.
I want it.
Yeah. Fucking insane. I mean, overall, the whole thing was big studio greed, big execs not wanting to lose out on their billions of dollars that they're making.
Oh yeah, what a shame that you might make 24 instead of $25 million.
I'm sorry, you can't get another Tesla. You can't get another house. Oh no.
One of my favorite capitalism jokes is there's this guy who works for a big company, and the CEO drives up in a Lamborghini, and he says to him, like, hey, you know what? Someday, if you work really, really hard, I can afford another one of these.
Oh my God, that's so good though, because it's also like, what kind of work do they don't
exactly.
do
It's so
like
accurate.
any of the work.
It's just like we're working for you to make all these millions of dollars that we don't see.
Yeah.
But you know, trickle down economics.
It's so insane. A few other things that came up as time went on with the strike, more in the fall, late fall, was there were talks of video game and voiceover actors possibly going on strike for similar reasons, AI protection, residuals, that sort of thing. Luckily, nothing huge came from it.
I think it's still sort of kind of ongoing, maybe
it's kind of in the, it's nothing's really been determined. If they had gone on strike at the same time as everyone else, though, it would have been insane. Like, the amount of media that we have right now through social medias, TikTok, YouTube, streaming, it would have just been on a complete shutdown because streamers wouldn't have been able to talk about games and that were under specific companies, TikTokers, etc. YouTubers would have had to make different content. Like, it's just insane. Like, just imagining what it would have been like, and then not having new TV and movie at the same time. I don't know what the world would have done. It would have been like, I think we all would have gone insane. Not that, I mean, we could have all just gone outside, and it would be like the moment in WALL-E when they all walk out of the spaceship and they're like, what the fuck is this world? Like, that's what it would have been like, because we all would have been forced to actually get out of our bedrooms.
Okay, boomer.
I'm just saying, as much as it would have sucked, I kind of would have found it funny to see.
It would have been very interesting to see. People still would have taken care of their shit.
And not to say, it is still big, important, like, it's the same, the voiceover performers, and when it comes to video games and voiceovers for movies and animation, it is just as big as the rest of what led to the strike. But I am glad it didn't happen at that time. Yeah, finally they were able to come to an agreement. I don't know how many times they tried to, the studios tried to,
4 or 5.
It was too many. But finally, in September and November, they were able to come to conclusions. September 27th, after 148 days, is when WGA managed to make an agreement. November 9th is when SAG was able to come to an agreement. Most of the agreements involved protections against AI specifically, especially when it comes to jobs, when it comes to using your likeness without permission. There was increased minimums, which is great. Barely, though. I think actors got like 7% increase, and writer WGA got 5%, which barely accounts for inflation, let's be honest here.
Especially if you look at it over 3 years.
Yeah. There was some good streaming participation and foreign streaming residuals that were added. Writers have a viewership-based streaming bonus now. Some increased health and pension contributions. A lot of the SAG and WGA is that you get access to healthcare and pensions if you make a certain amount of money each year. However, if you're one of the lower guys, you're barely scraping to make that cut. Which was kind of part of the discussion for the whole thing. So they got some increase on that, which is great. A quote I found from an article, and I don't remember who said it, and I've closed the article now, but it was basically like, this is a contract that will enable members from every category to build sustainable ideas. That was... Careers, sorry. Build sustainable careers. That was the idea behind this agreement, was that we're supporting everyone, from the lowest to the top, so that you can live in this industry and not be a starving artist, ideally. And that's just like the whole point is like a lot of people have second jobs and it's really hard to make it, which is still true and will probably remain true until the end of time. Just for whatever reasons. It's just the industry. It was never built well, and it hasn't continued well.
Right. And it's just making it more feasible, because if you got a writing job on a show, there's no guarantee that show gets picked up. There's no guarantee it goes for however long it goes for. But knowing that you can at least count on that aspect of your paycheck is nice, and you won't have to be like, I still need a second job, or
because you got some residuals. The show's doing great, and you're getting a little bit of money for it. You can at least rely on that. It's like getting a little bit of like an allowance to help you survive until you get to the next job and you have a moment to... There was a unanimous final vote, at least for the SAG Guild, which is insane because that's really hard to achieve.
The writers.
Was it the writers?
Writers was like 99.9.
It was insane.
And then SAG was like 76 point something.
And while it's not perfect, there's still plenty of things that need to be fixed to achieve. There's you can always go up. It was still a massive like win. I mean, nothing can be perfect, especially when it comes to contracts like this, and it can always be improving, especially in the industry, but it was still a big win for everyone. And so I mean, historical.
78.33% support.
Yeah.
SAG.
Wow. And historically, I mean, we'll be talking about this for years to come. We still sometimes talk about the 2007 writers' strike. I mean, the fact that it was writers and actors together for the first time since 1960, I mean, that's talked about. It's crazy. I found a list of just some of the shows and films and award shows. Award shows, too, were affected. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to kind of put some things out there. For some of you might not have realized what all was affected. You know, we had the Tonys were affected, the Emmys were affected. There was a Life Achievement Award tribute for Nicole Kidman that was postponed until April. Foreign film festivals, the American French Film Festival, Fan Expo in Canada, San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, all these things that you would expect, like, oh, it's just Comic-Con. That's fine.
Oh my gosh, but yeah, Comic-Con got super boned because the writers' strike.
Actors and writers can't go because that counts as press. No one, you know, it's insane. And because the comic conventions themselves can't support and press, you know, that's still press them like supporting those things. It's insane. Toronto International Film Festival, Adult Swim Festival, so many things Vancouver International Film Festival. I mean, so many things.
Do you think this is something?
A bunch of Avengers and Marvel stuff that was postponed. Yeah, what were you?
Do you think it's a good thing that, like, this sort of happened, other than the, you know, industry effects and the personal effects and the contract effects and, you know, affecting the future, but, like, something like Comic-Con that has become so centered around essentially just, like, the MCU, do you think it's a good thing that it had the chance to, like, sort of be more like it used to be and just kind of get back to, and just kind of not have to have that overwhelming air of, like, no matter what we do, we're not going to be as important as the thing that people come here for usually.
Right. I think it was a great opportunity for them. I don't know if it's really going to affect this next year's Comic-Con. We'll just have to wait and see. I think they'll just come right back at it, and the studios will be like, we need to get the money that we lost last year. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to make a huge future impact.
I don't think so either, unfortunately.
I think it
was just something I thought about.
The whole thing definitely opened eyes to more people than would have been aware. I think social media helped with that. Huge fan bases and pop culture has helped with that. The way it's ingrained in our culture these days. You know, back in 1960, barely anyone paid attention to what was happening. And now it's like literally everything that we strive for as a society. As sad as that is. A few other things, a bunch of Avengers and Marvel things, Avatar things were postponed. Community, the movie, was postponed.
That's a big blow.
I know.
That's the biggest blow.
That was the big one. Dune was a big one that got postponed. Couple Godzilla and Ghostbusters, you know, all those big franchises. How to Train Your Dragon, the live action one.
I'm okay with it. Oh my gosh. I know you've
John Mulaney, Knives Out 3.
Knives Out 3, yes.
Knives Out
John
3.
Mulaney, not so much.
Spider-Man Beyond the Universe.
Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Oh, there's a new Tron movie coming out? Jesus Christ. There's a bunch of things I'm discovering now. And then it's TV shows. Abbott Elementary was a big one.
Oh, I'm really worried that show's going to get canceled.
And that's such a good show, worried. Man.
It's so good.
Bob's Burgers.
Wait, really? Bob's Burgers was affected?
Production paused.
That's interesting. So
they completed a bunch of episodes, but they had to wait and pause.
Well, that's not what I was concerned with. That's not what it was. Because I followed Dan Povenmire, and for those of you who don't know, he does like Phineas and Ferb, Hamster and Gretel. He's done a bunch of stuff, huge in the animation world. But I saw a video he was talking about it because they were still working on like the show, and apparently like the animation contracts are different or like different unions from what's going on there. Though it could have been because
I think that one was the writers.
Not to get too deep into it, but animation, you know, you record, then you animate. So they probably already recorded and we're still just animating, and that guild is probably different than.
And they already had some scripts completed and just had to pause until they could complete more.
So like they would have already written them and recorded them before they got to the actual animation, so that's probably what it was.
Yeah.
You know what the biggest problem with a lot of things is, especially like Marvel projects, is they announce these things so far in advance that by the time they come around or they keep pushing them back, I just don't care anymore.
It's really, it's like, whatever.
You can't tell me a movie is going to come out in 4 years and then push it back another year and have me still be like, all right.
There was a bunch of shows that just had delayed premieres. Euphoria, Wednesday. And then talk shows. Daily Show, Drew Barrymore, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, SNL. Now you get into reality shows. Jeopardy, Dancing with the Stars, American Idol.
They did Celebrity Jeopardy over the summer.
There was a few, so they were able to do some things. They just had a fair amount of people that walked off, or they showed reruns.
So a lot of stuff.
I probably listed like an eighth of of the things that,
So it's a lot of shit that's been affected, but now things are sort of moving again.
Yeah, things are getting back into production. Things are being released. Things got expedited to release before the Oscars came out.
So the big question really is, how does it make you feel as someone who wants to be part of the industry?
I mean, it just reinforces how shitty of a livelihood I've decided to go towards. I mean, as someone who's personally affected by lack of jobs, I mean, it sucks. It sucked. And having to be so on top of, usually it's pretty easy, especially if you have an agent. You're just like, okay, I know it's good because my agent already looked into this shit. But if you're on a project and things come up and then you're now you're questioning everything, you got to figure out all these answers. People don't have answers. Wada. It's so stressful.
Yeah.
And then also just as a fan of things, it sucks to see artistry be postponed or be underappreciated, and hard work and artists just, as always, being the underdog. So that is what it is, though. Society, has failed us.
Yet again, and continually, in perpetuity.
How about for you? How does it make you feel?
I feel that I will probably never be successful in this industry because I am not willing to make the necessary sacrifices to be successful.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm terribly successful. I'm just here.
It's more than just it's also just you have to be willing to sacrifice certain aspects of your life. Oh yeah,
for sure.
And things like that I'm not as willing to give up to be successful.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, there are plenty of sacrifices I've made and I still make that become apparent when I'm next to my friends who long-term partners and relationships and marriages and kids and health insurance, there's plenty of things where it's just comparing. But when I look at my mental state and my passion, and I mean, not to say that my friends aren't quite a few of them have been lucky enough to find passionate jobs they're passionate for. But there is still sometimes that struggle to find what you want to do and being happy with what you're doing. So, I'm lucky in that sense, but we all struggle in different ways. Just, you have to decide what you want to prioritize and what you want to sacrifice, I guess.
That's all the strike news we got that is fit to print. And we'll end on that semi-downer note.
Hopefully next time.
But it can be better.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't choose the best topic to really start off our news segment with, but hopefully next time we'll have something a little more positive. Although it's hard with this industry, I feel like a lot of news is not usually on the positive side, but we'll see what comes up and we'll keep you updated. That's for sure. It'll be more relevant, more topical, more timely. This was just one we thought we could start off with, since it didn't need to be so expedited to fit the times. Or I mean, it still fits the time, but didn't need to come out quite so quickly. So,
to be fair, the SAG deal only just ratified in December, so we're only a couple months behind.
There you go. And I mean, we're just now seeing shows coming back. We're now getting back into the production hall, into the studios, and things being released as well that were postponed. So it is still topical. Especially we very briefly touched on this, but with the Oscars and awards seasons, just seeing how that affected what was eligible, what was out. There's plenty of movies like Dune probably would have been on there a few times. There's plenty of TV shows that would have been nominated or have to wait another year or so to be in the running. So it's just interesting.
We'll definitely keep our finger on the pulse.
Yeah, that is for sure. Thank you for tuning in to that BAM News. I'm Bill Billson, or whatever the fuck you called me before.
We've been Bill Billson and Chuckston. Have a BAM good day.
Have a BAM good day. Make sure you follow, subscribe, and check us out on Instagram to get some more news update and little previews of what to look forward to on next episodes. Don't forget to share, tell all your friends, tell all your family, Tell your
enemies.
Workers. Sure, tell your enemies. We just want the views. Thank you for tuning in. We'll keep you updated, and we will see you next time on That Bam News.